A pivotal matchup coming up for the Leafs this week. What could we really expect with a John Tavares contract and the Sens, the ideal playoff opponent? We'll discuss that and more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily things for all things Leafs here, hosted by myself, David Morassutti. Today, I am going to be going solo. Mike, he's almost done his vacation. He will be returning soon. I figured today will be the David day, the day where I get to talk about a few things I've had to, just off the top of my head, I've been wanting to talk about with, in respect to the Leafs season and where things have kind of been trending and certain things that have had a lot of discussion in the media lately. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I just want to make sure you guys also remember to subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube as we continue our push for 10,000 subscribers. And this is the time of year where we really want to get the views going, really want to get the subs up, because once the playoffs come, I know everybody's going to be starving for that Leafs content. And it's funny, a lot of people I know, they're kind of just waiting for the playoffs at this point. And look, totally get it, right? We've done the song and dance with the regular season many times before. Everyone just wants to talk playoffs. Everyone just wants to see what happens with these Leafs in the first round and hopefully more. But the big one here, obviously, the Leafs have obviously got to get to the playoffs first. It's pretty much a lock that the Leafs are going to make it into the playoffs. And I believe they've got great odds to clinch a playoff spot. We're not even talking about that. The big one right now is the Atlantic Division. How critical is it for this team to not only get the Atlantic Division crown, but also what are their chances? Currently, obviously sitting atop of the Atlantic Division with a 3-point lead over the Panthers and the Lightning. The Leafs have a 44.7% chance of locking up the division. That's according to Money Puck. Money Puck has a lot of the great odds you're seeing. They also track down, how teams are looking in terms of the strength of schedule and a lot of those things. Obviously, this is kind of a mini crucial week for the Leafs. This is not, I think, the most important week for the Leafs. I do think it's important for one reason only. They play the Panthers this week on Wednesday. But the reason why I don't think it's as critical this week is because it's a short week. A short week in a lot of ways. They only have 2 games on the schedule this week. So 2 things I want to kind of break up on that. One, may give us a chance to try to either get a guest or do a bit of a mailbag to give you guys some a little different content than just the normal, talk about the game, talk about what happened in the game. There's a little bit, I think that I'm sure some of you guys will have some questions. So you can start putting questions down in the comments. I'm going to be compiling some of them. I'll put out a video on a short video on YouTube. You can also ask some questions there. You can also go into our Instagram account. You can DM us on Instagram. You can also, we'll have a post up on Instagram that you can also send us your questions. We'll try to get to that a little later in the week because the Leafs play on Wednesday against the Panthers. They don't play again until Saturday against the Blue Jackets. So Friday looks like a good time. Friday mailbag might be a good time to do that because really it's a late week. And it's a good thing for this Leafs team because they just went through that grind of the California road trip, right? They played 4 games last week, the back-to-back Saturday, Sunday, changing time zones. They get a little bit of reprieve as they try to come back against Florida on Wednesday. Florida will be coming off the back-to-back. They're going to be playing Montreal on Tuesday evening. We'll break down the matchup and kind of things to expect, but that's a crucial game. You beat Florida on Wednesday, and that percent chance of winning the division goes way up. And in a lot of ways, it could just make it a Leafs versus Lightning battle for top. And the Leafs have one more game against Tampa too. If they really want to solidify things and get that number 1 seed, which we've talked about it before on this show, but I don't think people truly understand how rare it is for the Leafs to get first place in their division. In my memory, it's only happened twice. Lockout shortened year, Canadian division, where the Leafs were far and away the best team in the regular season. We know how that all ended. And then back in 99-2000, they also won the North Division. It wasn't even called the Atlantic Division back then. Obviously, things changed around when they did the realignment with the 4-division format. So this, in a lot of ways, I know people have had mixed feelings about winning division, but it's just not something we've gotten used to in this time with the Leafs. And it's they finish second quite often, finish third quite often in this new format. So yeah, it's going to take a little getting used to that idea of potentially winning the division. And I asked some friends of mine, like, do you prefer if the Leafs win the division and you get what's looking like if the Leafs win the division? I'm like almost ready to prepare for that Battle of Ontario come playoff time between the Leafs and the Sens. Or do you prefer to get one at Tampa or Florida round 1? My buddy's like, is that really a question? Do you want to go up against the defending Stanley Cup champions or the team that has won it many times in the last few years? Yeah, probably a good point. Also getting the home ice advantage through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, guaranteed if you get to 2 rounds, but pretty much having that in your back pocket certainly doesn't hurt either. And I also look at it like this, you get to see how you look against the Panthers, right? The Panthers have been kind of fluttering a little bit, kind of to be expected when you don't have Matthew Tkachuk and Aaron Ekblad. I to me, it's like, yeah, you got Brad Marchand, that's good and dandy, but I feel like that you were only going to get so far with those players out of the lineup for Florida, and there's only so much that roster will be able to do to withstand that type of loss. So I'm curious to see how the second matchup between these two teams go. We'll break down that matchup, obviously, on tomorrow's episode. And, Columbus is another one because they're obviously still in the mix for a wild card. They've also been one of those teams that has, I thought Columbus was in a really good spot. I kind of picked them as my second team to make it through, and they've kind of screwed the pooch a little bit here. 3-6-1 in their last 10 games. And that hasn't gone them out of the race, but they got to leapfrog New York and Montreal to get to that second spot. They could obviously still do it. I think this Columbus team has that potential, but we've seen the Rangers have been able to hold on with some big wins. Montreal has found not only beat Florida, I could see them beating Florida again, right? They've had their inconsistencies too, but it's going to be very interesting how that second wild card plays out. That's for sure. So yeah, pretty, mildly important week for the Leafs. I still think the next week, the week after that, is really, I think, what will define this Leafs season, because you got 4 games on the sched the week after: Florida, Tampa, Montreal, Carolina. That is a big week of hockey there. 2 against division rivals where you are either, depending on how this week goes, you're either going to be at a dogfight of the division or you're going to try to put the division to rest. And if you put the division to rest, those final 2 games against Buffalo and Detroit, you could hopefully maybe lighten the load of some of your star players and get them ready for the playoffs. Although we've seen it where you've tried to give these guys rest and it hasn't exactly worked out for them. So we'll kind of see where this week goes. All right, on the other side here, we're going to discuss our favorite topic here. We always seem to have these conversations on the podcast. That is contract talk. John Tavares, his name has been brought up quite often, and for good reason. He's having a really good season. He's had a really good stretch of hockey here down the stretch. I said stretch twice, sorry. But, some really important performances here from John Tavares, which makes us think, how is that number going to look? And how do we broadcast his future with this team. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. Just stop managing money and start building wealth. When I use Monarch, I really get some good insight onto where I spent money. You can set it for how much did I spend last year compared to this year. Where's most of my money going to? And it's so convenient. And if you have a partner, it helps you manage your money a lot smoother. And you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back here to the Locked On Leafs podcast. I want to thank you guys for making us your first listen of the day. If you're looking for another show to give yourself a second listen, go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast. You can also check out, if you want to look at other sports, you got the Locked On Raptors, you got the Locked On Blue Jays. We got you covered here on the Locked On Podcast Network of everything Toronto related. And I want to thank everybody who makes the Locked On Leafs an everyday listen, right? You guys will be almost like the first to hear what we have to say. And I do appreciate everybody who comments, everybody who makes sure that keeps us in line, keep us in check with what we have to say. We do appreciate it here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. All right. John Tavares, who is having, what an incredible season he's having. And I every time I say that, I have a friend who's just like, contract year. Every time I talk about John Tavares, it's almost like, yeah, it's a good year, but don't forget, it's a contract year. He's got a lot to play for. Not wrong. He's not wrong at all. But just think about this. In 80 games last year, he had 29 goals and 65 points. He is at 35 goals, 69 points, nice, in 67 games. Still a lot of time left in the season. And the big one here for me, we know sometimes we talk about how he gets a lot of power play goals, this and that. He is now up to 23 even strength goals. That's the most he has had since when he scored 47 goals, 37 of them at even strength back in his first season in Toronto. So yeah, I think, bit of it's not to the same level as we had come to expect when he first arrived in Toronto, but I feel like he can get around the same mark. I think 40 goals should. I think you could realistically see 40 goals, and if he's continuing to produce at the level he's producing, right? 19.8% shooting percentage. That's where you got to be a little weary. John Tavares is not a night in throughout his career average is 13.2%. He has never had a shooting percentage above, just looking here, above 16.4%. So this is the highest shooting percentage of his career. So you got to take that into account just a little bit when you're thinking about, what has led to this massive breakout from John Tavares right now. And it's a fair question, because when you're trying to determine how much money you are going to offer John Tavares through this last stretch, potentially at the end of the season, you really need to figure out, is what he's doing now sustainable? And I've seen a lot of good things from John Tavares, like this in March alone, right? 15 games played, 13 goals, 20 points. 13 goals in his last 15 games. It's unreal. The only one close, both Nylander and Matthews have 8 over the last 15. which is still a really good number. But Tavares has really found ways to just get, and 9 of those 13 goals have been at even strength. So yeah, he's getting he had 9 even strength goals, and he has 4 power play goals in that stretch. So he's getting production at 5-on-5, and also his faceoff numbers have continued to be incredible. 61.5% on the faceoffs. Matthews only better at 63.7%. So really, really good stretch here from John Tavares. And I'm curious what you guys think about what you would offer him, because we know the offer is going to come. The Leafs like John Tavares. And one thing I always talk to people about when they say, "Oh, let X or Y go, let this player go, let this player go." Who are you bringing in to replace a John Tavares? Because frankly, I don't see a replacement for him in free agency. Free agency is not exactly. We just saw the top free agent get scooped off the board in Mikko Rantanen. I know that he's had a bit of a tough year this year. Yeah, okay, you got someone like Brock Nelson is a name that some people brought up to me. I hear about Sam Bennett. I hear about who's another one here I've seen that people like. Really, there's Brock Nelson and Sam Bennett are probably the only 2 guys you potentially look at. And yeah, I can see why those guys are appealing, but neither of them have really had the production that John Tavares has had this year. I'll give one thing. Sam Bennett is an interesting one for me because of age. He's 28, going to be 29 next year. I can see that being a potential option if the Leafs really want to go down that road. But at the same time, we are talking about a player who is not as productive as John Tavares. His career high, he's about to if knock on wood, Sam Bennett does plays out the rest of the season. He's currently at 49 points in 71 games. Now, he's not known as the top, point getter in Florida. I truly get that. But you have to think about Tavares is at a point per game right now. He's putting up some really good production. Can Sam Bennett replace that? He is younger. I'll give him that. But will he be able to replace it? There are a lot of things I like that Sam Bennett does. Don't get me wrong. I just know what you're getting out of John Tavares. And I know some people are concerned about his age, his foot speed, and all those things. But what you cannot take away from John Tavares is his strength, especially with the puck. He is shooting he's going right middle of the ice. A lot of the goals that he has gotten for this year, 39, I would say almost 40% of the goals are from the mid-range slot. Yeah, he's like that right side quite a bit too on the power play. But I just really like the production from him at 5-on-5. That was always something that has been kind of critiquing him. He's played really well with William Nylander this year. Now, defensively, there are still some holes there. But he's also playing the most out of his whole career. And when you're looking at John Tavares, cap wages, I think, had him at about over $7 million in his projected cap for I think it was a 3-year deal. Cap wages, it's a pretty good tool. They kind of look at what a player like John Tavares could get if he goes to open market. I haven't seen where Sam Bennett, I don't know if he's going to get the 8-9 that I've heard some people say. I don't think he's that player. For me, I look at John Tavares and like the number that's been thrown out. It was talked about on the Hockey Central panel this weekend. I know Chris Johnson's brought it up, Darren Drager's brought it up, both 6 to 7 million. That is certainly, a subtraction of what he's currently making. But the term is, I think, going to be more important. And Chris Johnson's brought up deferred salary as maybe a way that Tavares can kind of help the Leafs out a little bit there. For me, you have one potential card here for the Leafs, or there is one card. Will John Tavares really consider leaving? Will he consider leaving? Now, we've seen him leave Long Island, but that's to come home to Toronto. Toronto's home. I think he's at the point of his career he wants to be in Toronto. He gave up the captaincy, to do the right thing, step aside, let Austin Matthews take the reins here. That's not easy to do as a professional, but I think just he truly wants to see everything play out right here. I think if you're the Leafs, you kind of, I think, understand that, and that's probably why there hasn't been this big push to sign. Obviously, there's also the playoffs. Do you want to see how everything goes come playoff time? I understand that. And I think that's where I'm at too. Like, if he, let's say, says $6 million is what I'm looking for, I could potentially stomach that. You do 6x4, right? 24 million over 4 years, 6 million a year. I think I would be okay with that, but I do want to see how the playoffs come around, because it could be one of those things. A lot of people bring up Steven Stamkos, but Steven Stamkos has always been productive playoff time, and it was such a shocking thing when Stamkos obviously left Tampa. When Tampa basically told him, we can't offer you what you're looking for. We can't offer you what you got in Nashville, right? And I think that gets missed a little bit there. I know the Leafs are going to want to make this as, they don't want what happened with Tampa and Stamkos. That was just such a, it struck that team pretty good. But, they ultimately decided for a guy who is 35 right now in Stamkos, 8x4, 32 million over 4 years. That was a pretty penny for your Nashville to pay, right? And look at where he's at this year, Stamkos. 23 goals, 45 points in 73 games. This will be the first time that Stamkos hasn't had a point per game season. Okay, 2020, 2021, he only played 38 games. He had 34 points. There's that. Like, it's been a while since we've seen Stamkos not have this production. I also think Nashville, the fit just hasn't really been there. Offensively, they've really struggled. And so I think the Stamkos situation, bit of a cautionary tale for John Tavares. Yep, a team could offer you a lot more money, but is it the right situation? Are you going to thrive? Are you going to achieve your goal? Now, obviously, as I've heard some people tell me, the Leafs haven't exactly thrived with Tavares. So, I always think about, is the grass greener on the other side? Are the Leafs going to be able to find a player that is going to be able to replace Tavares, handle that role, and be as productive? It's tough. It's tough for me to see that right now. And there's no guarantees that you can get a Sam Bennett if you let Tavares go, or even that you can get Sam Bennett for roughly the same price, right? Sam Bennett's going to want a decent contract. He's at he's at just over $4 million. Yeah, he's going to probably be looking the 6 and 7s as well, potentially. We'll see how the market plays out there. So if I was Leafs, you wait and see how the playoffs go, just like you're going to do with Marner. You're going to tell Tavares, no, we can't pay you the 11. I think he knows that. He's done making his double digits. We still want to give you half decent money, but you got to work with us a little bit here. So we'll see how that goes. Let me know what you guys think. If you had to offer John Tavares a contract right now, or even at the end of the season, you can pick either scenario. What are you offering John Tavares in a contract? Very, very curious to see what you guys have to say. All right, on the other side, we are going to look at what looks like to be a Battle of Ontario. I didn't think this was going to happen. I didn't think that this was going to be where things are going, but it's highly looking that way. That we're going to see the renewal of a rivalry that brings back some old memories. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I'm a big fan of the no shell variety. You can get them in different flavors. You can get them lightly salted if you don't want a lot of salt. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. I'm also big on I'm currently having the unsalted classic shell because there's a bit of satisfying crunch where you get to open every shell. I know sometimes it can be a bit of a pain, but I do like that. A little more work makes you maybe not eat as many of those pistachios too, but they are actually really good for you. It's a great protein, and if you really want a good snack when you're feeling quite snacky, pistachios are a great choice. So get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues here. David Morassutti, Mike DeStefano should be back either on the next episode or at least when the Leafs play the Panthers. And obviously, with a win over the Panthers, it really propels the Leafs quite up. It'll give it, depending really also on where Tampa, Florida, and Montreal, how that game goes. If we see another result where Tampa loses to Montreal, that makes the Leafs and the Panthers square on games played. So that matchup between the Leafs and Panthers could be pretty big depending on what happens on Tuesday. I'm sure many of us will be watching the Leafs take on the Panthers take on the Canadiens to see if Montreal can pull off another upset victory. Montreal's got a lot to play for, so they're a team that nobody wants to be taken lightly. And the Atlantic Division, it's a very interesting one because I think the most intrigue is with those top 3 spots. And even when you look at the Eastern Conference, there's two battles going on right now. The Atlantic Division title and the second wildcard spot. Because right now, the Ottawa Senators have a 99.6% chance of making the playoffs. That's according to Money Puck. And they are well way ahead of the Canadiens right now, 7 points up. Unless they go on like a cratered, and they drop, I don't see a 7-point swing happening at this point for the Ottawa Senators. So I think they can feel pretty comfortable in that top wildcard spot. And just the idea that if the playoffs were to begin today, you would have a Leafs Senators round 1 Battle of Ontario playoffs. First off, ratings in this country shoot right up because of the intrigue, I think, from all sides of whether you're a Leafs fan, Sens fan, or just a Canadian hockey fan. Because I don't know about you, but reminding myself of those Battle of Ontario days. Okay, first time, 21 years. Okay, 21 years ago, that would have made me 10 years old. Okay, 10 years old, the last time the Leafs and the Senators played in the playoffs. I think that was Game 7. The Leafs beat them 4-2. That might have been the Patrick Lalime yikes game. Now, obviously, I'm sure there's some Sens fans who feel really good about the potential of the Leafs taking on the Sens in the first round. Mainly because the Sens have won all their games against the Leafs this year. Now, we have seen this song and dance before, where a team has the regular season edge on a team, but then come playoffs, it's a totally different story. But we've also seen areas where I think the Senators can give the Leafs a bit of trouble. Tight checking, they're going to play that suffocating defensive style, and obviously the X factor is Linus Ullmark. That's going to be the big move there, right? Is whether or not the Senators will get the goaltender to put them over. And correct, Dylan Cousins, I don't believe, played in that game against. No, he would have played. Sorry, he would have played because Scott Laughton played for the Leafs. So we've seen, Cousins has done pretty good in his time with the Senators, and it's a good thing to have this type of rivalry. Obviously, like to bring back the nostalgia of the Battle of Ontario. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of the classic clips. Cujo, Belfour. You got Thomas, Sundin, McGillney, Alfredson, Heatley, Spezza, Tucker. Like, that nostalgia is going to feel really good come playoff time. But I think if you're the Leafs, you have to look at the improvements or the areas that they've been really trying to improve this team since the trade deadline with the new acquisitions coming in. I think Carlo has played pretty well. I think Lawton is starting to figure things out. I think he's getting more comfortable. I think there's a little bit more we can see from Carlo, but I think the Leafs, they just have to settle things down a little bit here. I'm very curious to see how they play against Florida. That's going to be a really good opportunity to see how they match up against, again, one of those other top teams in the league, right? And we'll see if that type of style, if the Leafs can break through. They haven't been able to break through against Florida this year. So a very important matchup, good opportunity for Leafs to show that maybe, they are starting to figure this out. They're starting to get themselves ready for that playoff style because, last thing I want to see is the Senators be the ones that come away in that type of matchup, because I just won't hear the end of it from some people on the Sen side. And you know who some of those people are. So let's just hope Battle of Ontario historically has gone right for the Leafs. Lately, regular season, not so much, but we'll see when the chips are down. Can this Leafs team figure it out? I know how some of you will feel about that. All right. I want to thank you all for joining me today for this edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. David gets to speak his mind, and you have to just hear what I have to say. So if you made it this far, I want to thank you all for listening and supporting me today. Make sure you go and you subscribe to Locked On Leafs podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. Go and give that little subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you're getting notified every time a video drops. On the next episode, we will preview the matchup against the Panthers. A big one for the Leafs, a big opportunity for them to right a couple of wrongs that happened, in the last few matchups against Florida. Can they finally vault themselves really far forward in trying to lock down the Atlantic Division? We'll discuss that next on Locked On Leafs podcast. So make sure you keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.